Elite Tactical Systems P320 magazines, are they clearly better? Let's find out. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and today we are going to talk about our review of the polymer magazines from Elite Tactical Systems, or ETS Group. ETS Group has manufactured magazines for several different platforms to include Glock, H&K, SIG, and of course AR pattern magazines. We've had some experience in the past with their Glock magazines, both in 9mm and 45, and we will have a full review of those a little bit further in the future. But this year they released magazines for the SIG Sauer P320 handguns. So I was fairly excited. We have several P320s here, and the factory SIG magazines in the 21 round capacity, which is what I usually choose for our 17 round or our full size P320s. They tend to be fairly expensive. Now, they are well made. They're steel-bodied magazines with polymer extended floor plates. They function 100% reliably for us. So they do everything I expect a magazine to do. But again, they are expensive. Now, the ETS polymer magazines, they do offer some advantages. And the primary one being the magazine is transparent. Now, you notice the one I have here, I've got it loaded with some dummy rounds. They're just orange polymer Glock dummy 9mm cartridges, so you can see how they are loaded up. And the ETS Clear magazines give me the ability, when I am running a demo, when I get done firing a string, or when I go up to fire another string for a demonstration when I'm instructing, I can pop the magazine out, I can look at it, and at a glance I can see if I have enough ammunition left to go ahead and finish out the drill. Also, when I shoot competition, say for instance IDPA competition, where you are limited to 10 rounds in a magazine, well then it's very easy for me to see how many rounds I have left in a magazine when I come off of a stage, and then top off the magazine to a full 10 rounds without actually having to unload all the previous rounds in the magazine and then count them back in. Now, yes, other magazines have witness holes on them. The SIG magazines have marks that will allow you to see at 5 and 10, etc. The Glock magazines, those have witness holes generally drilled in the back, at least factory Glock magazines do. But what I've noticed is in low light conditions, they can be hard to read. And then also, very often, especially in the 45 caliber magazines, they can lie to you a little bit. You can think you have a certain number of rounds in the magazine because you see brass through a witness hole, but that isn't the case when you actually get to it. So for that reason, I was very interested in the ETS magazines when they released them. So half the price of the SIG magazines, plus I get to actually see how many cartridges I have in the magazine. Well, that's all well and good, but they have to work. Now, as I said, I have them in the Glock varieties. They seem to work fine in our Glocks. So I went ahead and ordered 3 up as soon as they were available, and they showed up very quickly. I went ahead and pulled them out, tried them in a couple of the handguns that we had here, and immediately found a problem with them. The first set of magazines that we got, they would not drop free. So if I had the empty magazine in the handgun, then when I went ahead and hit the magazine release, the magazine would not drop free. I would actually have to go ahead and rip the magazine in order to get it out. So I tried it in a variety of different SIGs that we have here, to include the P320 X5 Legion, the M17, even the X Compact that I have. Tried them through a variety of different ones. I even went so far as to grab a bare grip with nothing in it and tried them out. And what I found was that in each of the different SIG pistols that were fully assembled that we tried them in, the magazines would not drop free. And again, these are totally empty magazines. But when I put them in a bare grip, they would drop free. Now the difference, of course, there is that I have no fire control group in a bare grip. What we found is that it appears the first batch of magazines that I got, the top of the magazine was just slightly too wide, and it was impacting the slide stop lever, and it would kind of get stuck between the slide stop lever. It didn't seem to impact function, but it would stick in there and you would have to strip the magazine out. Well, obviously this is not a good thing, because when you run dry, you really want to be able to just dump that magazine and go. So I took it out to the range, shot some drills with it, found that was the problem, called ETS Group, and they were very happy to go ahead and send replacements out. I also happened to mention to them when I contacted them that when we received 3 of them, the base plate on one of the magazines was ajar. It was hanging off. It wasn't fully seated on the magazine. What's kind of interesting is the ETS P320 style magazines do use Glock 9mm style base plates. So I believe that was probably a cost-saving measure, because they can use the same mold and the same parts for both magazines. But the benefit to the shooter, the end user, is that you can then put a very wide variety of magazine extensions on those same magazines. So there are a lot of base plates, a lot of mag extensions out there that you can use on these magazines. The drawback to it, of course, is you can't use SIG extensions on them. So if you have Gray Guns base plates, like I have on one of these factory SIG mags here, that does not work on the ETS mags. I can understand why, because these are polymer magazines. The factory SIG magazines are steel, so the tolerances on the grooves on the magazine body, or the lips on the magazine body, are considerably different. So when ETS replied to me, of course, they said, no problem, send them back. They sent a shipping label out to me that explained to me that the magazine base plate was more than likely just misinstalled at the factory when they were assembling the magazines, and that we shouldn't really have any problems after that. And I did reseat the base plate and didn't have any problems through our testing there. So we had some training we went to. About a week later, we ended up with shipping notification. They were actually fairly quick on shipping them. I just didn't end up getting a hold of the magazines for about a week later. We got the new magazines in. I went ahead and tested them immediately, pulled them out of the package, put them in an empty handgun, and as you notice, these are the replacement mags that we got, and they eject freely. No problems whatsoever ejecting the magazine. So I went ahead and loaded them up, let them sit and compress the spring, and then went out to the range to go ahead and try them again. Now, normally, you would take magazines out and you would go ahead and give them a test run on a regular training day. Well, I really don't do the smart thing very often, so I went ahead and loaded my magazines up and went to a steel challenge match. And I was shooting the P320 X5 Legion. So I was really rolling the dice, kind of hoping that these magazines would work in the P320 Legion. Now, remember, the first set, I didn't really have any problems with cycling and loading. I had problems with ejecting, and Steel Challenge does not require reloads on the clock. If you are reloading on the clock, then you really screwed up, and if you have expended all the rounds in your magazine, then you have significantly gone over your time allotment anyway. So I didn't think that that was going to be a problem, even if they didn't drop free correctly, although they do. They drop free just fine. Even if I'm at slide lock on the Legion, they drop free. So no problem there. So got the magazines out, got them loaded up, went ahead to insert them in the handgun, and I did notice that they drug quite a bit more when inserting them into the handgun than the factory SIG magazines did. And that was kind of an indicator of what was to come. So one of the strings while I was shooting, I went to slide lock in the middle of the string, and that baffled me quite a bit because I had only fired 2 or 3 shots at that point, and I knew I had started with 20 rounds of my magazine. I didn't load it up to 21. I usually load strips of 5 at a time, so I end up with 20 rounds in the magazines. So I knew I had plenty of ammunition in the gun, so that kind of bothered me just a little bit. Pulled it out, no big deal. Went on, I did my immediate action, cleared the jam, got back up, finished the string. On the next stage, I had the same thing happen. So I went ahead and marked that magazine, shuffled that magazine to the back of my belt, and went on with the other 2 magazines, and didn't have a problem with them for the rest of the day. But the other thing that I did notice was that full magazines would not eject. So this actually should have the most amount of pressure downwards on the magazine, because I have the slide forward. I have a full magazine in here. This one actually contains all 21 rounds. So the top round is pushing against the bottom of the slide, but with the magazine release fully depressed, the mag is still fully seated in the gun. I do have to rip it with a partial magazine. So those of you guys that shoot USPSA and are thinking about these, you're not going to execute a speed reload with a partial magazine. And in fact, when I went back out to the range and shot it, I noticed even with a partial, not with a full magazine, you still could not have the magazine drop free. In fact, if you notice here, I have a single dummy round loaded in the top of this one, and it will not drop free. So even with a single dummy round in the magazine, I still have to rip it. Again, empty magazine drops free just fine. So there is something going on in here when there is pressure against these feed lips that's spreading them out and causing them to drag in the gun. So that is kind of a big issue if you were intending to use these for concealed carrier duty. Now, they do make 15 round and 17 round versions. So if you had an X-Compact or something, or even if you're carrying a full size P320, then there are carry options. Not many people are going to carry 21 round magazines, but if you were so inclined to do so, I would have to say the ETS magazines are a no-go for duty or defense use at this point. Now, we did have one last little thing to do with the magazines. I did go ahead and take them out and drop them. Fully loaded with actually I take that back, it was partially loaded with the feed lips down. There's a couple of reasons I do partially loaded. One is that I wanted to make sure that there was enough weight in the magazine to accelerate it quickly when I drop it from shoulder height. The other reason is if you load them fully loaded, and the spring is pushing against that round stack as hard as it possibly can, that gives the magazine the best shock absorber it can get, because when it hits, the feed lips are not going to hit the ground first. The round will hit the ground first, the cartridge. And the cartridge will have to push up against a fully compressed spring. And so the cartridge will take most of the beating instead of the feed lips in the magazine. When you drop a partially loaded magazine, it's easier for that cartridge to move back out of the way and allow the feed lips to impact the ground. So I went ahead and dropped it a couple of times with a partially loaded magazine, and we ended up with a little bit of cosmetic damage, but function was not impaired. It still functioned just as fine as pre-drop, and just a little bit of scratch and scrapes on the feed lips themselves. So my final opinion of the ETS Group SIG P320 pattern magazines is that they are fine for training as long as you don't need to do speed loads. If every time you are going to dump a magazine from slide lock, then it's no big deal. So if you're going to run these to empty, and they did lock the slide back reliably, we didn't have any problems where it failed to lock back on an empty magazine, they are good to go. But if you're going to use them in competition where you need to do a speed reload with a partial magazine, then these are probably not going to work for you. For competition, I will go back to using the factory magazines with Gray Guns base plates on them. I prefer the Gray Guns base plates, even though this is a Legion and it came with Legion base plates. The gray guns seat a little bit better, and they come out of the gun like greased lightning. They also work in the 17. So that is what I will continue to use for competition. I already have 3 of these. I will continue to use these for training. I'll continue to use them in situations where I don't need to dump a partial and I still need to be able to see at a glance how many rounds I have in the magazine. But I will likely probably not buy any more of them until ETS figures out the problem with the dimensions on the magazine. Because of the way they function, I'm not inclined to go through the process of trying to send them back again and get other replacements. I just really don't think it's worth the time to go back and forth when I've got quite a few of the factory SIG magazines. Now, I'm not banging on ETS altogether. As I mentioned, I do have several of their Glock magazines. The Glock magazines work just like they should. I don't have any problems with them in factory Glocks and customized Glocks, although I have not used them in any pistol caliber carbines that accept Glock magazines. And one other thing is the SIG magazines do work with the ETS cam loader, and I really enjoy using this thing because it's very quick for me to grab some cartridges out of the box, flip it over, put this little guy on here. The magazine fits in the bottom, and then just like a stripper clip, you just jam those rounds in here, pull your magazine out, and you are ready to go. It is a little finicky, but it does work with the ETS SIG magazines as well as the Glock magazines. So if you were wondering about that, yes, it does work just fine with them. That's going to do it for our review of the SIG P320 magazines from ETS Group. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section down below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you like the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell icon to be notified when we release new videos. If you guys want to know how to support the videos that you know and love, please check us out over on Patreon. We'll leave a link down below. It does cost money to keep the lights on and keep the cameras rolling, and of course, byproducts. So please, we would love to have your help over there, and we release some exclusive content there from time to time and some behind the scenes views of things that are going on. So please check us out over on Patreon. And until next time, get out and shoot.